Good morning, everybody. I have to apologize in advance. I got a horrible cold yesterday, so you guys get me in this like lovely cocktail of like a NyQuil hangover and way too much caffeine that I'm on. So sorry about that in advance. But so anyway, okay, to start with a quick confessional for those of you who don't know me. Hi, my name is Haley. I'm a Democrat. I'm a progressive, which has been a little bit hard lately. I've spent my career working on Democratic campaigns and politics and democratizing technology in a bunch of different facets. But last year, the most like insane thing imaginable happened to not only me, but to our country, as we all know. It happened to my life in particular, which was this lovely gentleman entered the scene. And not only did he happen to our country and to my life, but he happened to become my boss. And I was in an extraordinarily odd position because I wasn't just a civil servant that happened to inherit him like the majority of the government. I actually ended up with the distinctly horrifying curse/honor of being the only Obama White House official who was asked to stay on in the Trump West Wing. Now, obviously, that doesn't seem like a hard thing to say no to. But I was in a little bit of a predicament. This was the predicament. I had just poured years of my life with many other people who are here in this room and all sorts of the community who helped to support this effort, building a young fledgling team that at the end of the Obama administration had just managed against all odds to actually become relatively successful. I feel very, very fortunate. It's like warms my heart in so many ways to be in an audience that is actually relatively familiar with USDS. But this was the team. So I won't go into too much detail on it. But for those of you who haven't heard of it or are not familiar with the way that we work, I'll give you a very quick overview. So the team is called the United States Digital Service. Our mission is to deliver better government services to the American people through technology and design, everything that this community knows and breathes and does very well every day. Our vision was that we were working to close the huge gap that had unfortunately started creating in our society between the quality of commercial services that we know and love and use every day and those that are often laggish and sluggish and horribly far behind provided from the government. The playbook that we were doing this to do this through is quite simple. It was recruiting the tippity-top of the folks from the private sector, bringing everybody like yourself, bringing them into government, where we paired them with top innovators inside government who actually knew how to get shit done and make things happen, and build small multidisciplinary teams with massive air cover from the president all the way on down, and drop them into the most critical transactional services that we had inside government. So things like veterans benefits, student loans, immigration, et cetera, with a massive mandate to go transform them for the better and actually close that gap and make them work. Now, this was an exceptionally hard undertaking. And when we started, we thought maybe we would be lucky to recruit like 10 people, maybe take on 2 to 3 projects over the rest of the administration. And much to our surprise, by the end of the first 2 years, we had recruited over 400 people, and we're taking over dozens of critical, mission-critical projects all across the government. As you can actually see from the last slide, one quick thing I was exceptionally proud of is that the team was over 50% women and exceptionally diverse, which is something that we care about. So just a quick piece of context, like one quick example of how the team works, then we'll move off it since I think most people here are familiar with it, but some context. So the United States government, believe it or not, spends a lovely $86 billion annually every year on technology projects, on IT, which is mind-blowingly insane large number. This is more than all of Silicon Valley, if you were to wrap that into a bundle, spends on everything annually combined. Now, the real kicker here is there is a 94% failure rate of those projects. These are our taxpayer dollars, right? Like, this is an epic crisis of delivery that we're living in the United States government. 40% of these projects never see the light of day, and 94% are over budget or are late. 40% never make it out of and into a place of production of any kind. It's a staggering crisis. So the theory of change USDS was working against was, if you actually study classic patterns of disruption, it was quite simple, right? You take something that has become routine and standard in one industry, and you apply it to another where it's a radical departure from the status quo. So think like Airbnb took stuff that was very normal from hospitality, applied it to our apartments, and like boom, we're in a revolution. So that's what we did. We took very normal practices from the tech community, agile, waterfall, moving things to the cloud, user-centered design, very, very simple things, not rocket science, and brought them into these institutions where they were new to help create the greatest amount of change for the greatest number of people possible. So one super fast example, which some of you might be familiar with, it's a tried and true example, but it's one of our favorites, immigration. So this is the classic immigration application. As you guessed it, it is almost 100% paper-based. They literally send files and boxes of papers from processing center to processing center, and when you add up the distance it travels, it goes around the globe almost 6 times. It's insane, super, super inefficient. Best case scenario, application takes about 6 to 8 months to process for very simple things like even renewing your green card. So about a few years, actually nearly a decade ago, the government was like, cool, maybe we can do this better if it's online, and we should actually tap into the efficiencies of that. Let's give it a shot. The typical process began 6 years later, remember that 94% number, 6 years later, and $1.2 billion, like billion with a B, it failed to deliver a single piece of working code. And that was actually sadly very normal for how things go in government. That's the status quo. And at that point, the agency responsible, which is USCIS, Citizenship and Immigration, they could have done what also always happens, which is like, oh shoot, that contractor didn't work out, let's go back to the drawing board and try this again. But instead they didn't. They were like, we need to think differently, we need to do this differently. And that's where they called us, the United States Digital Service, and our partners 18F and GSA, and we were able to come in, drop in, and start helping them. Within months of being on the ground, we were able to break up, we were able to start delivering the first product that ever been released on this, and in a very normal incremental fashion. We have now taken, the first product we worked on was the Form I-90. This is the paper-based form that should be very, very simple process-wise, because it's applying for your replacement green card. So we know you, we know who you are, and we just need to give you a new replacement card. This form, I'm now happy to say, is 100% online. You can actually apply for a replacement green card with nobody touching a piece of paper. It's faster, better for the employees who are doing their work, and also for the people who rely on these very, very important pieces of plastic that are your right to stay in this country, your right to work, et cetera. So we did this, again, like I said, by just breaking up these monolithic, waterfall, multi-year contracting processes and bringing in the normal parts of Silicon Valley way of working that we are all steeped in and know and love. And this might sound incredibly obvious, obviously, but this is not how government normally works. And we've continued in this agile fashion to release other products. This is a quick screenshot of MyUSCIS, which 18F helped us build to make this very complicated immigration process more human. We've released new payment systems, case activity statuses, and through each of these forms that we're releasing in the immigration thing, we're bringing them online one by one, and we're on track to be hitting an entire digitization of all of the immigration work soon. So there are dozens of projects like this happening across government. And as I mentioned, this is not actually rocket science, right? This is actually just really hard work and smart people showing up to try and make our country better and to try and help those who need our help the most. So anyway, back to the very, very tough decision that I was in the beginning of this, which is, what do I do? I'm a Democrat. I don't believe in anything that the president is doing or stands for, but we have this team who's extraordinary, actually starting to show results, and new, and is actually pretty much potentially on the chopping block. So I made the very, very hard decision in the heat of the 2016 election, where emotions were flying around, to stay and to do what I could to help protect the team. Despite the fact that it cost me a lot of family who stopped talking to me, a lot of friends who stopped talking to me. It was a very, very emotional decision for a lot of people, but for me, the decision was made. These results were, or this team was showing results. I believe that people needed it now more than ever. And if we believed the things that we had been saying over the last 2 years, that this work is actually about more than politics, it's about more than parties, it's about actually making our institutions and our government work for the people who need it most, then we had to stay. So I was armed with a very specific... It's very nice of you guys, thank you. So I had a very specific checklist of things that I was there to get done to secure the team. The second that checklist was completed, I put in my resignation the next day and left. But I'm extraordinarily excited to say that the team is still alive. It's going strong. It's 150 people strong right now. And best of all, the mandate has not changed one bit. We still have teams in the exact same places that they were working on before, on helping our veterans, on helping immigrants, on helping students. It's the same type of people doing the same type of work in the same model, which also relies in a shocking way on support from senior administration officials. But best of all, I was actually at the, I have left, as I said, I'm no longer there, but I was at the office the other day, and this little sign was in the window, which is hard to see, but it says, "Hate has no home here." So the culture also is alive and well at USDS, which is amazing. And not to mention, not only is the team still delivering great results and doing great work with a great culture, it's had some of our biggest wins yet. One of the small projects that has unfortunately plagued at least 3 administrations now, both Democrats and Republicans, has been getting the Department of Defense and the VA onto the same medical record system. This has been something that so many sessions of Congress have tried to solve, so many administrations have tried to solve, and this was one of the things that USDS was fortunately able to come in and help the beginning of the process to work. For those of you that don't know the story right now, literally they ship paper records, they drive them from the Pentagon over to the VA building and drop them off. That is like the majority of the record transfer system. It got so bad that a few years ago they literally paid to structurally reinforce the floors of the Department of Veterans Affairs because they were collapsing under the weight of the boxes of paper. So like, it's a problem. And while this work is definitely nowhere near done, I'm extraordinarily excited to say that for the first time in decades, movements are being made to get, contracts are in place to get both the DoD and the VA onto the same record system provider. But let's have a chat later about the health records ecosystem, because we need a lot of people to start companies in that space and help fix the competition there. But anyway, this is a huge, huge, huge accomplishment. One of the biggest things USDS has done, and it happened in the last few months. So, and what this sort of represents, honestly, is that like this is the watershed moment, right? Like this is where we have transcended politics. We have actually made it. We have survived. We are here to stay. We are getting support from Trump of all people. We were founded, obviously, by Obama, and this movement is taking off, which is fantastic. But so where does that leave us, right? Like this is definitely not the mission accomplished moment. I wish we could say that we were all done, cool, it's here, and we're ready to move on. But as every single person in this room who works on this stuff knows, we face existential threats every single day. And as I said before, I personally believe that this work has never mattered more than it does right now. Which is why, honestly, like we're at a bit of a moment of cultural reckoning. Another thing I don't need to explain to this community, and as Mika teed up in the beginning, we live and breathe it every day. But this moment is different. We are living through a very, very, very big moment, one that we need to inspect and reflect on very carefully. And I believe that what makes this moment different now is that this is not a war being waged at individuals or by individuals. We are living in the middle of a war that is being raised against our institutions and some of the most significant institutions in our culture. And this requires, honestly, a reevaluation of the strategies that our community is using to figure out how to get there. And I hate to say this part, but I think to many of us, and I actually got chastised for this in early 2016 as much as I did for my decision to stay, this was predictable. I called the Trump election. This was actually not hard to see if we pick our heads up and step back and look at the forest through the trees. But there are a few reasons, there's 2 big reasons I see behind the actual problem here that we all as a community need to start paying attention to. The first one is actually very well summarized in this disgusting chart, which is provided to us by the fake news site of the New York Times. But this is the divide that's currently happening in America, where the rich are getting richer and the poor are getting poorer. This is income disparity, and it's been underway for a long time. This is not new, but as we can see, we are in this extraordinary spread. And to be honest, for another moment of self-reflection, like guys, this is us. Everybody in this room is on that upper right quadrant. Even me as a public servant on my 9+ years of a civil service salary, we're up there. And we need to be cognizant of that, and we need to be figuring out how we can use our skills as a community to start actually building solutions that address this problem. Because the reality is the upper right quadrant of that chart are these guys, right? And their teams are building what I like to call the servant as a service industry, right? We're continuing to remove every single inconvenience imaginable for ourselves, whether that's like someone can come literally into my house now to drop off my packages, like, okay, cool, or do my laundry, or like send a vegan hot meal to my doorstep or whatever it is, buy my groceries for me. And on the second hand, like this move fast and break things culture of these companies is actually starting to do just that. It's starting to break our culture. And meanwhile, thank you. And meanwhile, the US government is also failing on two fronts. It's failing to step in and help solve this crisis and to regulate and protect our consumers. And it's failing to deliver on the core services themselves that actually help prevent this problem in the first place and help prevent that income disparity. The government is fundamentally failing to get people access to the services they want when they need it and how they need it. And this sharp contrast is creating the second factor of the crisis. Which is this other horribly ugly chart going the exact wrong direction, which is public trust in government. This is from a Pew study that's, oh, sorry. This is from a Pew study. Where is that? Sorry, guys. This is from a Pew study that actually shows how sharp this decline has happened. And I believe that that disparity gap of both our tools and how we build them and where our income sits in our communities is driving that. And honestly, like, our governments deserve, this is a deserved line. Our institutions deserve, this is accurately reflecting what our institutions are doing to deliver for our citizens. And the really scary part of this problem, though, is that when, as we all know, a pact between institutions and those they serve is broken, shit can get really weird really quickly. And this is not a sentiment confined to government. Our media is going through this, our tech industry is going through this, our institutions writ large are going through this. And they're being questioned and they're being under attack, and rightfully so. But the real questions we need to ask is, are our institutions, and is our country too big to fail? And quite sadly, I don't think so. We don't have to look that far back in our history, particularly European history, just several decades ago, to see what happens when we have a collapse of institutions. And we are dancing dangerously close to having all of those ingredients to make the same kind of cocktail right here. So don't get me wrong, they deserve to be criticized. We need to criticize them. We need to ask them to be better, but we cannot let them fail. We simply cannot. So what do we do? What do we do about it? Well, when I moved to DC almost a decade ago, I was talking with a dear friend of mine, Van Jones, who had about kind of some of the lessons that he had learned in community organizing, and he had an amazing anecdote, which I love. It was that he used to think of politics and his community organizing as a person walking on a tightrope. And he said he thought the entire goal of politics was to actually push the person to the left and push them off to the left of the tightrope, and then we win. And then he realized that actually that's not what the game is about. The game is moving the entire tightrope to the left. It's changing the entire conversation and the entire movement. And this is our moment right now to move the tightrope, to stop pushing each other and stop yelling at each other and pushing and trying to do this sort of agitation, but to actually just completely redefine how we're looking at these problems and how we're building solutions for them. But that requires some self-reflection, right? And I think the moment that we're at right now is needing to rethink a little bit of what the resistance looks like. Because the resistance can't just be a map of congressional districts that we must win or a single man that we need to get out of office. Because that's not going to make all of these problems go away. Because this actually, as easy as it would be and as lovely as it would be to think that this is just about Trump, it's not. He's an easy villain to villainize, and I'm never going to defend him. But it's easy to miss the forest through the trees when we focus just on him. And now is not the time to turn our back on our institutions. Now is not the time to turn our back on those we distrust, Facebook, the media, et cetera. They need our help more now than ever because the people actually need our help more now than ever. This is not about blatant, thank you. You guys are kind. This is not as easy, again, as it would be to say this is about my racist aunt who lives in Wisconsin. It's not about blatant racism. This is about the system not working for everybody. And we need to fix it. We need to not forget these two charts, because this is what we need to be building for, and this is what we need to be working on. Excuse me, I'm sorry, my cold is like so bad. And part of what we need to do that is not actually to force people to care about electoral politics. It's actually to widen the tent of the resistance and to help get people engaged where they can and in ways they can to help this problem. And to be honest, I definitely don't have all the answers, but I believe in this community, and I believe that we can figure it out. And we can't let this movement that we've built, that is actually starting to work, suffer the same fate that election tech does, which is we focus on it every 4 years, and then we drop it in between in the off cycles, and we don't actually continue to build sustainable movements. So there are just a few you know, as one of my dear mentors, Todd Park, likes to say, we are in desperate need of a few brave men and women to come join the fight. We need people to serve. We need people to serve in places like the United States Digital Service and other teams. We need people to take this movement global and local. We need to go down into the states. We need to go into other countries. We need to go to the communities, and there's tons of great work happening in this space. We also, this movement is here to stay. We need to start demanding elected officials bring this into their platforms that they're campaigning on, and they start asking for this change as well. But most importantly, and in some ways the hardest, we need more visionaries who are willing to continue to fight hard inside the belly of the beast, inside our institutions that are troubled, whether that's the media or inside tech or inside our political parties like the DNC. These are all in collapse. And we can't villainize people who are, I mean, let's criticize Facebook, please, we need to. But we can't villainize the people who are inside trying to create change. And we need more people to follow suit, because if we don't go into these places and start actually creating the change ourselves, it's not gonna happen. So please don't censor your criticism. We need it now more than ever. But let's hold each other up as a community and support each other as we fight this fight as change makers, as doers, as builders that are actually, I believe, we are capable of constructing a new world order that we want to live in. It's just time for a reframing. So to leave it, there is, this is one of my favorite things from the Obama Oval Office. He had a little plaque on his desk, which was there every single day. I always, you know, the red button is very ominous underneath it. But, but it said, hard things are hard. No, it's a tiny red button, right? I wonder if Trump's fingers can even fit in it. Sorry. Anyway, but the point is, hard things are hard, right? And this is going to be hard, but we need to do this now. Like, we have no other option, because we cannot fail at this. And the question is no longer, can we do this? We have the playbooks, we have the people, we have the talent, we have the brain share. The question is, will we do it, and will you? Thank you. Thank you.
Come sit with me for a second.
Great.
Thank you.
Sorry for dealing with my voice.
You sit here. You sit here. So we only have a few minutes for Q&A. We definitely want to get to one or two of the audience's questions. But thank you for that fantastic talk. So very quickly, if you could maybe address how does inside the digital service, how do the sorts of questions that Natalie Harris was bringing up earlier this morning about ethical issues that arise, how does that get dealt with? I mean, and you know, I know this may be sensitive to talk about publicly, but you know, has the USDS ever needed to push back against some kind of unethical use of tech? You know, we know that there's probably somebody, you know, at Palantir with a contract to, you know, figure out how to use machine learning to identify undocumented people living in the United States. You know, so there are definitely other ways to use technology in service of other government goals, right? So talk about the ethics of this.
Yeah, and it's obviously a very hard nut to crack that we're not facing only in government at places like USDS, but also Facebook, Twitter, you know, name your tech company. But the way at least I approached that problem, and I'll be honest, we had moments of ethical questioning that came up in both administrations. And a lot of that is due to a lack of understanding of how to use technology and not understanding the implications of it all of the way. So in my opinion, the only way to fix that problem and to make sure the right ethical decisions are made is getting people who understand the technology into the room at the decision-making table, because that's how you prevent bad decisions from getting made. But the problem is you can't do it if you're not there. And you know, a lot of people were like, oh, I'm going to stay in the administration and I'm going to wait until that line gets crossed and then I'm going to quit. For me, the line was crossed before he even entered the Oval Office. Like that line was so far back there. It wasn't about that for me. It was about being able to go in and actually help create those firewalls against the bad things happening.
So question, let's go back to the failure rate of those expensive government IT projects. And I always ask this, which is, why don't we hear more about how much is actually being saved by, you know, I think you know, people would be amazed if they knew that billions of dollars were actually being converted back to, you know, back into the general treasury because of, you know, so why don't we hear more about this?
I think that hits on like two very big things, cultural problems in DC. But one of the dreams I wish would come true one day is if there was like a bounty of some kind for public servants, where if you saved a ton of money, you got to keep like 0.01% of that, which would have made like the quote unquote like stock value of every USDS employee like, but I think that this actually hits on the biggest cultural problem that is one of the core roots, as I see it, of the issues in DC, which is there is a very severe culture of I almost use a Trump word, of just criticism and persecution when things go wrong. The number one thing you hear walking around any federal agency is like, oh, don't be the first one to try something, because if you're the first one to try it and it goes wrong, you're going to have your ass hauled up to Congress and you're going to be testifying and you're going to get fired and you're going to be on the front page of the Washington Post. Like congressional testimonies and front page of the Washington Post are like the two, like, oh God, you don't want to do that. And it creates this extraordinarily risk-averse culture. And it means that no one wants to stick their neck out and be the first one to change. But when you have teams like 18F and USDS come in, show that things can be done differently, it just opens the floodgates, because people are like, oh, cool, we're not the first ones, so we can go and do this now too. So we actually thought of USDS in many ways as simply a vehicle to outsource risk, so that way we could kind of break that cycle of fear. Because we're like, if it goes great, take the credit. If it goes wrong, blame it on us. But I think that we do need to see more attention paid to the successes that are coming out. We need to celebrate civil servants for being, for taking risks, for trying things new, and for trying to do things differently, and shift the paradigm from being like taking risk and failing is bad to the status quo is failure and we need to change it. And that is, I think, a shift that we need to do in coordination with media and Congress and this community.
Last very quick question at the top there. So who is involved in the digital service movement, and why should people of color and women cooperate with it?
That's like a very great question, but also hard to answer because it's like stating that the sky is blue. Like diverse teams, as we all know, create better outcomes. And that is just like a simple fact. So, but it's something that was very important to us at USDS. It was a hilarious battle of lawyers, and just like where government just gets itself wrapped around the axle so many times. We wanted to come out and say that we had a goal of recruiting a team that represented the demographics of the United States of America, because we wanted to be the people that we were building tools for, so we didn't have the problem of Facebook and all of your huge giant tech companies that are a bunch of rich white dudes building tools for a bunch of other rich white dudes. Like, we wanted to actually have that representation in our team. But unfortunately, because of various quota laws and things, we weren't actually able to come out and say that goal, So anyway, it was not a formal goal that we had, but we crushed in tech industry benchmarks in terms of diversity and women on our team. Absolutely crushed it. And did that through an amazing team of recruiters. Jennifer Anastasoff was our head recruiter, and she worked her tail off to actually try new recruiting strategies, to reach out of the tent, to not go to the same wells that everyone goes to for tech talent, but actually bring more folks and widen the tent and broaden this movement.
Yeah, and your success at doing that, I think, will be paying dividends for years, as the people who do the service for a while, then go out and do other things. There's so much leadership that's being generated from that. It's amazing. So thank you so much. We are out of time, but you're going to be doing a workshop this afternoon, going deeper into all of this. We could get that slide up so people know where to go. But thank you again, Haley.
Yeah,
thanks for coming back and speaking even with a cold.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, don't hesitate.